So we are SoCal WAC reenactors. So that is spelled SoCal, stands for Southern California. We have our website www.socalwac.com. We also are on Instagram. We're on Facebook. You can see all sorts of stuff there. So the primary purpose of the WAC was basically free man to fight. And that wasn't just for the WAC, that was also the Navy, the Marine Corps. They needed more manpower overseas, so the jobs that were non-combatant jobs needed to be filled by women. So that would be anything from the motor pool to working in the aircraft hangars to even testing weapons, and of course secretary work, things like that, where women could be used was where WACs, WAVs, and Marine Corps ladies were actually going to be inserted. And that's because women in the Army weren't necessarily anything outside of that capacity. They were usually nurses, women in the Army. So having women doing these other jobs is something that's completely new for the Army. You know, previously in other years, in World War I, they were told that they were part of the Army. They said, you're going to go out, you're going to be doing communications work, you're going to be a full part of the Army, but Congress never actually got around to really cementing that in. So when they were coming back from war, they were told, you guys aren't veterans. And so they didn't get that veteran status until the late 1970s, because one of the handful of women that was still alive just wanted a flag on her casket, sort of thing. So that's the precedent to World War II women in the Army. They have this history of an organization that really doesn't want them there and isn't prepared to have them within the ranks. So all of these books, except for one of them, I believe, is like right post-war, our little WAC Life one right here, but it's still really relevant to a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. The books on the table are a combination of fictional books that were meant to heighten the public appeal of the WACs to especially a younger generation, as well as things like, for example, we have our little Chattanooga WAC book that was issued to women who were being stationed at, like, let's say, Fort Oglethorpe, so that they had this little guide of things that you can do in Chattanooga as a service member, and specifically for women. So, you know, you can go horseback riding, there's a memorial auditorium, things like that. So they were issued little pamphlets like these, and this one's just really pretty too. But other than that, we also have, of course, as I was talking about, little novels about WACs on their escapades, which are actually really highly sensationalized. So, I mean, you don't want to take these as like, this is what happened, because they really weren't. But it was all part of this idea of making the WAC be this adventure for a young woman who otherwise probably didn't have an opportunity to go over to Europe, into Africa, into the Pacific, you know? And of course, one of my favorite ones is Winnie the WAC. You've probably seen a lot of these illustrations online. They're very popular, very famous artwork. And they're really adorable, they're really cute, but it is, like I said before, it's a product of its time. Almost every single one of these illustrations and the little captions is pretty 1940s sexist. They all really hone in on women. How are women in the Army with their underwear? How is it like to be in a majority of male-dominated space, kind of thing, but not in anything like series of their own problems that you look at, but it's more of like men not really understanding or not knowing what to make of women in the Army. This is a brand new thing, and so this makes light of it, this silly little goofy cartoons that really probably wouldn't pass standards today.
So the Women's Army Corps was a multiracial unit. They included Caucasian women, they included Hispanic women, or Latina women, African American and Black women, and even Japanese American women. Sad to say that there is a sort of segregation within the Women's Army Corps. There was an all African American and Black women's battalion. The name escapes me.
The 68888. They were one of the first units over in Europe that did postal work, and that's an amazing story that I love reading up on.
Absolutely essential part of the Women's Army Corps was the diversity within it.
And to add on to that, it's just a product of its time. When the Army Corps was first created, Women's Army Corps was first created, they wanted to specifically attract wealthier women who had a higher status, so that just like they wanted that status within the Corps. So they did put a cap on how many people of color were allowed into the Corps. They wanted it to be majority of upper class white women, but this was a huge stepping stone into having a more integrated Army.
So what's some of the differences between the female uniforms and the male uniforms during the time?
So basically for Women's Army Corps specifically, the quartermaster didn't want anything that was specifically women that hadn't already been assigned to men. So for example, right now, Molly over here is wearing her ETO wools. So this entire uniform she's wearing has a male equivalent to it. So, so a lot of the differences you'll see on the whole is that, of course, women's shirts tend to button opposite of men's. That's a traditional thing. So hers buttons right over left, whereas men's will button left over right. And of course, it's form fitted a little bit more to a feminine figure. If you've seen the really early uniform designs, they were even designing them on male mannequins. That's obviously not going to fit female soldiers. So you'll see there's smaller collars for a smaller neck. You got a little bit of ruching up top here and the darts that just make it fit comfortably better. And of course, a big thing for trousers especially was that women didn't wear front fly pants back then. That was, I wouldn't say taboo, but it wasn't common. That wasn't what you really wore. So a lot of her stuff is side buttons. So, and especially for these ones, if she's got some wool pants underneath, they button on opposite sides of each other, so she especially is nice and warm. There's no drafts coming in there. So, yeah.
I think the best part is when my modern friends are. The best part is when my modern and normie friends take pride and respect me for what I do. I have had a lot of instances in modern spheres and restaurants where we all get made fun of and kind of mocked or and that kind of stuff. And even I've even had friends. But to be respected by people that I call friends is really something I'm really proud of. And when people ask me questions, when they're interested, when they want to come to events with me, when they want to learn how to swing dance, all this kind of stuff, it reminds me that there's a story that needs to be told, and it needs to be told well.
Pretty much along the same lines, especially, walking out of your apartment complex is a little weird sometimes. Got some weird looks this morning, but it's always a fascinating look because what we portray specifically are women in the Army. So many people, they're like, oh, it was just nurses. And the nursing story is absolutely amazing to listen to. It's fascinating. But women did stuff outside of that capacity. This was, one of the first times that they were doing other things that were non-traditionally feminine. And so I love opening up that dialogue with people who are so interested, like, I did not know that, tell me more. That is what I love the most about doing this, is just the amount of stuff that isn't in your history book, but it's something that needs to be told.